On today's episode, Eddie and Webby bring balance to the force. This is the Eddie and Webby Podcast.
Hello.
Eddie, it's Webby.
What's up, Webby?
Not too much. You feel like doing some podcasting right now?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hey-o.
Oh, hey, how's it going? This is Webby, not Eddie.
And I'm Eddie, and this is our 15th podcast.
Oh, yeah. Episode number 15.
Yes. Let me tell you guys, this is a podcast that you do not want to miss, and you want to tell your friends and family about because it's friggin' huge.
In fact, this is going to be quite a different podcast for us.
Yes, I would definitely say it is quite different than what we normally do.
We normally talk about beer, we normally talk about technology, and we talk about pickleball.
Yep.
But today, we're actually not going to talk about beer or technology. We're just going to focus on pickleball.
Just on pickleball. So for those of you that listen to our podcast for the pickleball part of it, you can listen to this whole thing. You don't have to skip over beer or technology. Just listen to the whole thing, and you don't want to miss 1 second of this podcast.
And I don't know about you, but I am extremely excited about this episode.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Like, I'd say I'm even more excited about this episode than any episode we've done so far.
I'm more excited about this than any event that's ever taken place in my entire life.
And the reason we're so excited is we have a very special guest with us today. He is a world-renowned pickleball coach. Yes, that's right. He frequently travels the world teaching people how to play pickleball.
Yeah.
And if that's not exciting enough, he is also the author of a #1 best-selling book.
What?
And that book is about pickleball, and it is called Smart Pickleball. He is known to many people as the Pickleball Guru. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us today is the one, the only, Prem Carnot. Prem, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Eddie and Webby. You guys are. I just got to know a little bit more about you guys, and I'm so excited about being part of your program, and happy to share any wonderful pickleball information I can to your community and podcasters who listen to you.
Well, we are honored to have you on the show. This is a very momentous occasion for us, and we do appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. We have a lot of questions for you, though, that we hope that you might be able to answer. So why don't we start with probably the most popular question that everybody has, and that is, when did you start playing pickleball?
Interestingly, I'm originally from France, and I met my wife in Paris, who happens to be a Michigander, and she and I, after a number of years of dating together, and then ended up wanting to be on the same side of the Atlantic, either France or the U.S. Obviously, we chose to be in the U.S., and then I resigned the job I was doing in Paris and moved to the U.S. and settled in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle area, and the community where we bought our house had 5 pickleball courts, and that was 2006. So that's 14 years now that I've been playing pickleball. I've just played recreationally at the beginning to start with, till the gentleman who introduced me to the game got me to go to the first ever national championship, which happened in 2009. In Buckeye, Arizona. And till that point, I had no idea what I was getting into. And when I went there to play nationals, I discovered a whole range of pickleball. And this was still early days of pickleball in terms of competing in a bigger scale. Luckily for me, most of the players who actually won that particular year or were in the podiums were mostly from the Pacific Northwest. So I got to go back and play and befriend these people and get to play more competitively with them. And obviously my skill level improved drastically. And over time, I became a better player, and I got a better understanding of the game. And a few years later, by pure accident, I would say, I don't pretend or don't claim to have a coaching background behind me, but I do definitely play a lot of competitive sports where I did have coaches. And so by accidentally one time when I was in San Diego, playing recreationally there, a local gentleman, a gentleman who was actually vacationing there, actually asked me to teach him some tricks in his game, having helped him and some of his friends, just friendly, advices and suggestions. He ended up, giving me the moniker Pickleball Guru, and that pretty much stuck. And he pretty much insisted me to go on to coach, which I tentatively did not really think I was going to be great at that, or at least I had my fear that I'm not that great of a player. How could I be? I was a very good player, but I wasn't sure that I was going to be a great coach. But he nudged me, said that I had all the qualities for it, and it started off that. And so officially, I started coaching 7 years ago. So, and it's become a full-time gig for me for 7 years now. And I travel, as you guys said, all around the world, teaching, doing clinics, boot camps, and workshops across this country, in the U.S. and Canada, but also a lot now internationally in Europe and Far East Asia.
Very nice. Now, besides the United States, what country would you say pickleball is the most popular in at this current time?
The United States and Canada definitely are the biggest contributing communities of pickleball in the country. I mean, in this part of the world, but outside that, Europe is definitely really picking up a lot. Spain and Holland are two large communities I can think of. And I just came back from India, and India is getting a real big pull of players in 5 or 6 states. They're having their nationals coming up in a couple of days, actually in August 4th or 5th or something like that. And there's a lot of players coming in, competing into it. I also got to see some of the, their top movie stars, the Bollywood stars, as they would call them, playing it. And in fact, one of the top, doubles tennis player, Mahesh Bhupati, who won 26 Grand Slam titles in doubles, is now starting to play pickleball. So there's a big pull in that part of the world too right now. So I think India is probably going to outgrow very quickly in just sheer numbers. I'm not sure about the facilities and all that, but in sheer numbers, I think India will outgrow by just its population and the number of players who are going to be playing that game.
That's great. So you've played all around the world. Do you find that there's different styles of play depending on which country or continent you go to?
Absolutely. I mean, where in certain, like India still has a very strong badminton background, so players there play more of that style of game, which means that their reaction time is very quick. There's a lot of snappy, and the wrist actions are more snappy. It's not more locked in certain places like tennis players do. And if you go down to the Far East, where there's a lot of ping pong players also, then there's a lot more, they try to put a lot of work on the ball, and try to spin a lot more. And, so I get to see a lot of, different types of play. And, currently I know the tennis, people with a tennis background coming with a strong tennis background seem to be dominating the game, because there's a lot of that translating into pickleball. But I'm sure as the badminton players and the table tennis players get hold of a good understanding of the game, I think there's going to be a next level of high level play, which is going to happen, which would require not only a strong fundamental game, but also I think lots of quickness and readiness at the non-volley zone line, which is the most important part of the game.
So when I first started playing the game, I met a USAPA ambassador named George Cook, and he's become a very good friend of mine. And one of the very first things he did was told me about your book, Smart Pickleball. I just so happen to have the book right here. And I picked up a lot of great tips from this book. A lot of things I'm still trying to implement. There's things that I just have some bad habits that I'm having a hard time breaking out of, but There's been a few great things that I've learned from your book, and a couple. I just want to name a few of the things that have really helped me out in my game. That would be, of course, keeping the paddle up. You're big on pushing, making sure you keep that paddle up, and for sure that is a big thing that I still struggle with. I don't do it as often as I should, I know, but when I do, when I make sure to keep my paddle up, I can tell my game improves drastically. And also related to that is being in the righty position. That is huge. And then something that I heard you talk about in your podcast also is dancing with your partner, which makes a lot of sense. Like whenever your partner goes way to one side, you need to make sure you stay within a certain range. So those are three of the biggest things that I got from your book that like have helped me tremendously.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing it, and no matter how many times I hear it from different students of mine, it's always validating for me to hear that it actually has some impact on the type of game. I just happened to get to see your play on one of your recent tournaments, and and I happened to notice that one of those things which you were saying, one of the tenets, which obviously keeping the paddle up, was not as consistent as I would have wished you guys would have had. And yes. And in one of my recent podcasts, I talk about it actually, patience in your striking the ball. And I think I noticed in your game plan, you guys went attacking more quickly or more without waiting for the right opportunity to pounce on. So one of those suggestions, and I often talk about that in the book, but also in most of my clinics and classes, I talk about it as the crouching tiger technique. It's basically you crouch, crouching is like the slow game. It's like the tiger crouches, waits patiently, and it's hungry. It really wants to attack, and it wants that deer out there, but it waits patiently and waits for the opportunity when the deer is not paying attention to attack and be able to eat. And it's the same analogy I have for pickleball. Is your slow game is your setup game. It's like you're crouching, you're waiting for that opportunity for your opponent to drop their paddle down or get out of position for you guys to attack that ball, or put a ball up for you to attack the ball, but not so, just because you want to attack it, it doesn't mean that you should attack it at that point. And I think there are a few number of rallies in that particular game I saw in the Beer Fest, was that what it was?
Beer City Open.
The Beer City Open, yeah. And in that particular one, I noticed that you guys went too quickly to the attacking mode. And also, one of the suggestions, personally, if I could make to you guys was...
Oh, for sure.
Please.
You guys were trying to really put that drop shot in place. I think the idea was really, really appreciative I was really appreciating that you were trying to do it, but I think the technique behind it was a little bit more needed, a little bit more, finesse and a little bit more working around it. Most importantly, you had to get down to your knees, rather than trying to strike the ball, which means that the angle of the paddle goes from back to front, whereas you have to actually get underneath the ball. Like you actually have to bend your knees and just lift the ball more, scooping the ball more rather than striking the ball will give you a lot more leverage in terms of getting that accuracy in terms of your drop shot. And the book actually has a diagram that shows you where you want to pick the ball so that it gives you more stability. So those are a couple of things I really wanted to suggest so that you guys can do better. But overall, I think like anything, we all have to improve. It doesn't matter you're the top dog or you're at the bottom play. We all, the whole idea is to keep learning and improving as we grow, as much as in pickleball, as much as in life too. So, so that's what I would recommend. So there's nothing wrong, inherently wrong in the game. It just needs, like anything else, we just need to, keep perfecting it till we get a ultimate satisfaction in the game.
Yeah, definitely. We really appreciate the feedback. We love hearing it because obviously we want to improve. I feel like I picked up your book a little bit too late because I was actually listening to it on the drive here today, the audio book, And you talked about a couple of those techniques, but you also touched on something that I think that Webby and I we can relate with a lot right now. And that is, we left this tournament, we got our butts kicked, but it motivated me to want to get so much better. And I know in your book, you talked about that happened with you and your wife at your first tournament. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. As I said, the very first tournament was somewhere in Seattle. We went to play, and then there was not a lot of tournaments at that point. Today, you can open up the pickleballtournaments.com page, and you can see probably 10 tournaments happening in the same date in different locations. But at that time, there was very, very few tournaments across this country, and Seattle was definitely the hotspot where it was birthed. So I went to the first tournament in Seattle, and obviously the tournament was already pretty highly rated, and there was only 2 levels. Basically, there was one which was 4.5, and the other one was the 5.0 and over. So either you had to get into the 4.5 or the 5.0. At that point, we obviously did not qualify for anything else than the 4.5. So we tried going in there. In the very first tournament we played, I remember as a mixed doubles couple, we just tried to hit, good shots, but we were still getting beaten. And after the match was over, my opponent at that point came to us and gently told us, like, you guys played really well, but you seem to be hitting balls, a lot of balls to me, which you shouldn't be doing. You had to target the weaker link in this group. And obviously in this particular matchup, it was a girl. So you'll have to go after the girl at this point. And it was a very important lesson I learned at that point, because I think a few weeks or months later we went back to the same venue for a different tournament and played against the same opponents. And this time, obviously, we said, okay, we're not going to go to this guy at all. We're just going to attack this girl all the time. Mm-hmm. And the result was very different, obviously, at this point, and we won it easily. And even though the guy was very gracious about it, and said, that's how the tournament is played. In a tournament play, you got to have to, attack where you see the weak link is. And it does not matter if it's a girl or a boy, but in this particular case, it was. And full credit to this particular tip, which was actually given by one of the renowned pickleball players in the country, a very good friend of mine named Steve Wong, gave me this tip. So it started off like that. And obviously, it motivated us to know more better. But Nationals was our biggest opening, because till that point, we did not know anything about dink. I had really good passing shots. I would lob everything up because I was playing in Seattle. So playing against senior citizens, it felt like it was so, joyfully. I was feeling very good about it. I was a very good ping pong player, so I used to spin a lot of balls, but nothing worked when I came across better players, because when you had a 6-footer in front of you and trying to lob over them was not a good one, and especially if they had young legs. So there was a lot of those learning processes. And then, as you notice, if you actually notice the high-end plays, rarely you will see a lot of anyone lobbing out there. As long as it's in the lower-end play, you see that. But in the higher-end play, definitely not, because it's a no-brainer at this point, because they will crush it at you. So there are a lot of those learning curves we learned the hard way. But, it was something which I relished the challenge of being able to challenge ourselves and learn. And Wendy and I actually spend over, I would say, 10 hours every day practicing.
Wow.
For months together. And obviously our games got better, and muscle memory is all built in now. I can probably walk to a court and still hit drop shots, because it's been reined in like that just by practice.
Sure.
But having said that, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be practicing, but it simply says that the system is already, mechanics are already in place. It just needs, just refreshing.
And Zelda the cat is a big fan too. Zelda the cat just joined us here. I'm not sure if you can see this, but she's she wanted to check out the action too.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, I'm really, really appreciative of you guys, making pickleball as one of your podcast, and broadcasting that to your group, because I'm sure there's a large group of people who are, love this game, a crazy game we all like, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in person at some point, and sharing court time with you, and maybe I'll learn a few things from you. I'm not sure about the beer part, but I'll probably learn something more.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Eddie, but I would love to attend one of his pickleball clinics at some point. That would be awesome. Have Eddie and Webby visit the Pickleball Guru for a clinic?
Absolutely. I think that would be fantastic.
All I know is that most of my clinics and my boot camps have always been sold out and filled to the brim. And it's not. I'm not doing that for bragging rights here. It tells something that I'm probably, it gives me some understanding that I'm probably doing something right about this, because if not, people would not be coming in. If I was a bad coach, it would have been known by now, in 7 years. If I've been doing this year after year and been able to, fill up places, it's because I think there's something in there I'm doing well. But I wholeheartedly am passionate about the game. I spend a lot of time on the court, even though there's a certain set time which I'm designated to do. Generally, I go overboard over an hour or even two sometimes. The boot camps, for example, officially every day we have about four hours of court time. But sometimes there are lots of clinics, boot camps, where each day I would probably do 8 hours of it instead of 4. So I'll go overboard as long as my intention is always to give utmost satisfaction to every student coming there. Clinics and boot camps are a little different. Clinics is a little bit more larger group. We work on fundamentals, really, on working on trying to get them to find the ideal tweaking on a serve, on a return of serve, on a drop shot, on the volleys, on the dinks, and possible things. And then in the boot camps, it's more a very private group. It's limited to 8 people now. It's on 4 days, and we basically work on very specific strategies. We have these very fun words for each and every session. The first session is more of the evaluation session in the boot camp. The second session is called, drop until you drop, which basically talks about drop shots from every part of the court. The third session is called, being a shark at the net. So it's all about, all net play and how to be very consistent at the net. It's all about the dink, the volleys, the putaways. The fourth session is called the building the consistency parts, because, from any level you want to improve to the next level, you gotta have to be consistent. Every stroke you make less unforced errors, and that makes it a much better presentation, when you come to playtime. And the fifth session is a funnest session. Generally, most of the time, it's called dancing with your partners. And you get just alluded about that in my podcast. And it's all about partner play, partner communication, strategies around how you play as a team, how much far you have to be, where do you have to be on the court. It's all about placement and positioning. And both those topics are dealt with. The sixth session is called Take It Home, Baby, and it's mostly all about giving very individualized options for each student on what needs to happen. Then in the few months to go by, and then what I really want, because I keep tracking them and calling them back and finding out where they are in their progress and what needs to happen or what suggestion I could give them. And generally, the Monday morning session is a 3-hour long session. It's mostly play, but it's more a commented play, so I could stop and and just give them input when they need it, but allowing them to play so that they actually start applying everything they went through the boot camp. It's a very intensive program. Mm-hmm. It's generally for a player who's got all the fundamentals already in place. When I mean fundamentals, knowing how to serve, knowing how to return, possibly at least know how to hit a drop shot, or at least know the idea of what a drop shot looks like, and have a certain idea of the game in general, and a flow of the game. so that they have the basics in place, so that when they come into these boot camps, then we can really into their individual skill levels and drill them. I normally have an assistant with me, so we are generally barking a little bit more. No yelling, but definitely I push them to the core as much as possible without being a drill master. But I will push them till they're satisfied, and it's a fun one to do. So people who are interested in getting into a clinic or a boot camp, they can. Generally, my boot camps are scheduled in advance, pretty much scheduled in the certain areas through the year. January generally is Florida. February generally is also Florida, and then March I'm generally in the Caribbean. Like this time, I think it's Costa Rica. April I'll be at the U.S. Open in Naples, and then May I'll be in Richmond. June I'll be in Kansas City. July in southern France in Nice. August Vail, Colorado. September Kona, Hawaii. October Sacramento, and November Tucson. So there's a whole bunch of those places, pretty much. And boot camp clinics are normally scheduled around those venues for people who want to do the lower end, just get the fundamentals right. But
well, nice. Well, let's say you have a packed schedule in front of you. It sounds like
it is. I had 3 more boot camps coming up this year.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well,
and you guys are invited anytime to join one of those clinics.
Oh, thank you.
I think we need it. I think we
we absolutely need it, and that would be great. Now, earlier you had mentioned you were talking about your podcast a little bit. So what actually drew you towards doing a podcast?
I've been asked to do this for a while. It's just, as I mentioned to you guys, as I just mentioned now, that I've been quite busy with my teaching gigs. It has been in the back of the mind, but I couldn't really get around it. Finally, Randy, my assistant, who's a very tech savvy person and who was able to gear everything around podcasts and webinars and other presentation, got on board, and he's been on board for a few months with us, and he has been pushing for it really strongly, and so here I am. I've just finished recording my 5th episode with nice. Randy, and we've been having fun, and it's something which I really wanted to share. It's an easier platform also, because every month I had to sit down and try and write this newsletter content sometimes. So it's easier also to be able to give access to pickleball players in a different platform. And it's also one of the new platforms which people can access while they're driving on a car, or, able to listen.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of podcasts, but I feel like ever since we started doing a podcast ourselves, I've actually become quite addicted to podcasts. I find myself, anytime I'm driving, I'm always looking for a new podcast to listen to. And I've listened to all of yours. I've enjoyed them thoroughly. I've picked up some good tips. And I love podcasting. But Eddie here he actually had to talk me into doing this podcast because I really wasn't sure it was something I would be into. I didn't think I would ever be able to talk about anything long enough to justify doing one. But it's been a lot of fun. And you mentioned Randy with your podcast. Is he the one that goes by the Mantis sometimes?
That's right. Randy Mantiply is his last name, so he goes by the Mantis, Mantis
Nice.
Fly or something like that. So
Nice.
he's actually a former student of mine. He's still a student of mine. He's come to a couple of my clinics in Pocomoke, Maryland, because I think he's from the Northern Virginia area. So he came down a couple of times, and so at one point when I was looking for someone to add to my team, I had put out some feelers out there, and Randy applied for that position, and so then once we talked along with him, and we realized that he was a good fit. I wanted someone who had a definitely some good passion for pickleball and had some background in pickleball, it would be easier for me to communicate information in a way which he would understand or she would understand. And so there you have it. And so Randy has been a wonderful and a sweet addition to the team, and he's brought a lot of good things to us, and he's obviously pushing me to involve in other platforms which I need to go through, especially even videos in terms of video coaching, like, putting out tips in the video formats. I have a lot of them actually recorded, but it's still sitting somewhere in some drive which needs to be formatted and published in different platforms. So hopefully we'll be able to get that done in the near future.
Great.
Very cool. Well, Prem, I can't thank you enough for joining us here today. Smart Pickleball, that's the number one selling book that you should definitely pick up if you want to learn some great tips on how to do just what it says, play smart pickleball. I mean, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Is there anything else you want to say to our viewers and our listeners? Anything you want to talk about or let them know about that you're up to?
Well, I mean, obviously you guys have already told all about the clinics and the boot camps, as well as the podcasts and the newsletter. There's hundreds of tips on the website. They can, sign up and, for free, and they get access to a lot of contents and articles and strategies of, which have been written for the past 7 years. But having said, that, one of my, favorite quote I often say is, just go and enjoy pickleball, and remember, it's only pickleball. Have fun at it.
That's great.
Awesome.
Great wise words from the Pickleball Guru.
Yes.
Honestly, I can't thank you enough. This has been an honor to have you on the show. I'm sure our listeners and viewers are definitely going to appreciate this. So honestly, thank you, Prem. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much again, and to you both. And I'm hoping that your viewers and listeners will enjoy this podcast, and hopefully I'll be happy to share more information in the future of your podcast whenever you guys can and whenever I can.
Well, we will always have you on as a guest. It's an open spot for you.
Anytime, just let us know.
Thank you, guys.
Definitely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was awesome.
Seriously.
I mean, we just had the Pickleball Guru on our show.
The Pickleball Guru, the number one best-selling book author on our podcast.
Yeah, if somebody would have told me a few months ago that we would have the Pickleball Guru on our podcast, I would not have believed it. I would have thought they were crazy, and it happened. We did it.
Yeah, it still feels unreal right now. Hasn't sunk in yet.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I feel like this is a sign that we've made it, kind of.
I agree. We have made it. Yes. Prem did talk a lot about what he does. We're going to throw a link below in the description to his website so you can check out his website, which has links to all the great content that he provides in the boot camps and seminars that he talked about today.
Yes. And like we mentioned before, the book Smart Pickleball, which is right here. It's also available in digital format. So if you like your books digital.
Actually, I downloaded it in audiobook format today as well.
Yeah. So if you like it in the audio format and not the visual format, then that's the format for you. And that's an option. Go for it.
You know what's cool about the audiobook too is he understands that in the actual physical book, there's a lot of diagrams and demonstrations. If you download the audiobook, there is a link to a website where you can get just those printouts or visuals that he uses to go along with it. So that's real nice. Yeah,
I had no idea. I wondered about that because that is a big part about the book is the diagrams. So that is very cool. I did not know that.
Did not. Well, I don't know about you, but this was an action-packed podcast. So much action that I think we should probably just end it. What do you say?
Yeah, I really can't think of a way to make it any better than what already happened. So I'd say it's a perfect place to end this episode.
Well, on that note, I'm Eddie.
And until next time, this is Webby, not Eddie, signing off.
See ya.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Uh-oh.
Oops.
You
Sorry.
okay over there?
Yes, I am.